All right, my dear friends, let's get into True Obsessions. Now, this is without a doubt my least favorite of all of my solo records. And depending on how you count them, I've got 14 or 15 of them. And it's not to say that I don't like it, but there's just so much that looking back on it doesn't work now for me. At the time, I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. I loved it. I think deep down I was kind of convincing myself to really, really love it because it was by far the hardest, most stressful, most work, the hardest blood, sweat, and tears album that I'd ever done up until that point. And I got a really big feeling of accomplishment, and I just thought it was great, and I really, really was proud of it, and I still do like parts of it very, very much, but if I had to give it a grade, I'd give it a C. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Regardless of how I feel about it, it shouldn't influence you in any way the way you feel about the record. If you like it, that's great. That's fantastic. I mean, a lot of times music, or most of the times music, is really all about you. It's not about the music, or it's not about the person making the music. It's about you. I'm talking to you. It's about you at the period of time when you discovered it, and the way you felt when you heard certain parts of the music, and the way it made you feel over the years. So it really has very little to do with anything other than your life experience with it. So it's probably more interesting to talk about this than an album that I'm just still in love with, because there's just so many things that might surprise people about it. But let's get into it. The first thing that I definitely have to say when I'm talking about this record, making it was such an ordeal every single step of the way that I wound up learning a lot of things, learning a lot of very, very important lessons, important life lessons, music lessons, business lessons, recording lessons, producing lessons, just a lot of things that even though I had a pretty solid career up to this point, this was my first major label album, and it was my first, the main thing for me, it was my first major label solo album, and for me, being on a major label was my biggest goal in life. Before I joined Megadeth, it was what I thought about day and night, every single day. And when I joined Megadeth, of course, I was excited to be in a band that I really liked the people and I liked the music. But the one thing that really stood out was that I was just so incredibly relieved that I'd finally made it to a major label. So it was really important to me on that level. And then to have my solo music released on a major label was a big deal. But with major labels comes a lot of other responsibilities that don't exist when you're in the indies world. But I really haven't listened to this record for many, many, many years. Very few of the songs have been played live. And if they were played, it was very little. I know we played Rio rather recently, actually, in Japan. We played it twice with my orchestral band, when we have the proper instrumentation to do a song like Rio. I mean, there's all kinds of instruments that don't exist in a regular rock band, so rather than trying to fake it with my regular band, sometimes when I have, strings and pianos and synths and, cellos and all that stuff, when I do those gigs, it allows me to do a song like Rio, which I think is by far the best song on the record, my favorite song on the record. But let's go into these things that I learned from the record, from the whole entire process. Now, the main thing I learned was you got to have the right guy for the right job. A lot of people, musicians, make the assumption, the very incorrect assumption, that just because someone is a wizard at playing their instrument doesn't mean that they're going to be able to play what is right for the particular part, or what you, or me in this case, the producer, the artist, wants to get played for that part. See what I'm saying? There's a lot of guys who are just fantastic players, and when you watch them play, you're like, oh my God, this guy is a genius. But then you realize when you ask them to do something that they can't really get the feeling right of, then you have a problem. And I'd never really been faced with this situation up until this point, which is really quite amazing considering this record was done after I'd done all the Cacophony records, all the Hawaii records, and all the biggest Megadeth records. In all those situations, I'd never come into a situation where I'm about to explain to you what happened on True Obsessions. And this is such a lesson that I learned, just a big old lesson. You really have to do the right casting. Casting is so important on any project, not only in music, but anything, personnel. What are you doing, and who is going to be doing what, and make sure that person can do exactly the way you want it, or at least have a backup person in mind. Well, here's the story. How can I start this story? Well, I'm just going to go in and out of order of this whole record and just bring up points as we go. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. The keyboard player who I had worked with on my previous 2 solo records, Brian Beckvar, who just did such a fantastic job on both those records, as well as True Obsessions. I believe it was him, and Brian, if I'm wrong, don't kill me, but I believe that he recommended this very famous session bassist. I'm not going to say the guy's name here. I mean, you can look it up. It's probably on the internet or the liner notes or whatever. But anyway, Brian Beckvar, who as a musician I respect very, very much, he said, yeah, you got to use this guy. He's a great session player, and I know how to get a hold of him and get him to do the record. And apparently, not apparently, but like I totally trusted Brian's opinion because I worked with him on 3 albums, and he's just a mind-blowing musician. So I just said, he knows my music, Brian knows my music, so he would recommend a guy who's really good. And I've heard this bassist's name before, and he's a very well-known session player. And so I figured it'd be great. I'm not doing anything that's like too crazy. You should be able to play it. So I had that in mind, and I went and recorded my record. And when you're even on indies or major, you're on a pretty tight budget. Now, you don't have a lot of days to mess around. So you have all your days, planned out beforehand, which I had done. Of course, this was my first major album, and that means I had a much bigger budget than I did on my first 3 solo albums. It was a really, really nice budget. Back then, budgets were big, and you needed that kind of budget because you were recording in a Class A recording studio, and things cost money. So, like I did on all my other records, I made a nice budget. I knew it was going to take this many days for guitar, this many days for drums, and the drum tech's going to do this and this. I had my casting pretty much set and all the budget, and that was all laid out. But then it came time to do bass, and on the Scenes record, I did bass rather late in the process, so I believe I did the similar thing on True Obsessions. At least most of my rhythm tracks were done by the time bass came in. And so this bassist came in and plugs in, and very nice fellow and professional. And if you've heard the record True Obsessions, it's kind of a rock record. Some metal, some balladish stuff, but it's basically rock. Now this bass player plugs in, and I don't know how to explain his tone other than saying it just sounded like butterflies farting. It just, I don't know how to explain it. It just sounded like just no clarity. It was you couldn't tell the difference between the pitches of the notes. And I've actually used this technique sometimes if you're playing jazz. If you can get your tone to a certain level of kind of mumblish sound, you can play anything and it sounds right. Try it. It really does work. As long as you land on the important chords in your changes, you can sort of fake jazz by just having crappy bass tone and just playing anything. And I couldn't believe what was happening because I put up the song and it's just your basic. I don't remember what the first song I put up for him was, but it was a basic rock groove, very typical. And it was just like, it was like fluttering around. It was fluttering. He was playing very softly. And I'm like, dude, you're going to have to rock this thing up a little bit. And I don't think he took offense to that, but like when he tried to rock it up some more, it was just weak. There's no way it was going to work. And another thing is I could have played bass myself, but I wanted a real bass player on the record. And, a real bass player is going to play 1,000,000 times better than I would play. I would know what notes to play, but there's a thing when you play bass that if you're not a bassist, you don't have the right volume consistency between the notes, and it just sucks. And so I just wanted a bass player. And like what I was asking the bassist to play was nothing fancy. It wasn't like Cacophony or anything like that. It wasn't as regimented as Megadeth stuff. Any decent rock bassist could have come in and rocked this stuff up. But this super pro comes in and he just can't get it. He's like kind of playing the notes right, but I couldn't make out any of the notes. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm fucked. This whole day was like 10, 11 in the morning. We were started and I'm like, we're not going to get anything done with this guy. But I remembered one song that was on the album called Intoxicated. And this kind of had this semi-fake R&B, light jazz kind of groove to it that he would be perfect for. And I put that song up and he nailed it. He just played it exactly what needed to be there. But even within that song, there's a hard rock section. And I'm like, no, he wouldn't be able to play on that. I don't even think I bothered having him try because it was just so far away from anything I could use. So I got him on like half of Intoxicated, and I just said it's not going to work. Thanks for your help, and sorry it didn't work out. And I don't think I was angry with him, but I was like absolutely just flabbergasted at the situation, and I was fucked because I had the entire day marked off for bass, and it wasn't even lunchtime, and I had no bass player. And we were in L.A. It was a studio called Fat Planet, which was Max Norman's place. And if you remember, any of you Megadeth fans out there, Max and us in Megadeth actually built a studio in Phoenix, Arizona, and recorded Euthanasia there. Well, as soon as that record was done, Max packed up the entire studio and moved it to L.A., to Van Nuys up in the valley, and I recorded True Obsessions there. So it was all the exact same gear, and just in a more studio-like, it was kind of like a more modern version. It was, the one on the Euthanasia album. It was nice, but it wasn't, it was like a building with a studio in it. But in L.A., Max really did it really, really nice. And so it was an A-class studio. Here I was sitting in this A-class studio fanning my balls with no bass player. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm fucked. And I didn't really know a lot of bass players in the LA area at that time. At that time, I had just moved to Arizona, I believe. Or I had actually lived in Arizona for a while, so I didn't have any bass players that I could get to the studio within an hour. I really didn't, which is odd, come to think of it, because you would think that I'd know everybody, but I remember thinking, I'm fucked, I don't know anybody. So I asked Max. Max wasn't engineering my record. My record was engineered by Steve Fontano, who did all of my other stuff prior to this, or lots of the other stuff. I asked Max, I said, dude, you know any bass players? And he says, I know one guy who might be able to do it, but he's a fretless guy. I'm like, that's even worse than the Butterfly guy. I don't need any fretless playing on this record. And then and he said, no, this guy is really good. He can rock. He won't even know it's fretless. And I'm like, dude, anything. If the guy can come down here, and we can give it a shot, because otherwise this day is gone, and I don't have days budgeted to be waiting around for bass. So he calls this guy Tony Franklin, and Tony Franklin is a wonderful, wonderful bassist and a great guy, English fellow, and he comes down to the studio, and he nailed the stuff. He did the whole entire album in one day. He just nailed it. He got it. I don't remember if he played a fretless or not. But as long as it didn't sound like a fretless, I was cool. And it didn't sound anything like a fretless. He had great tone, maybe the best tone of any of the instruments on the record. And worked his ass off. Usually, recording an album, a bass player, in my experience, I've usually spent 3 days, average around 3 days, to get really great bass tracks on a record. But we only had one day, and Tony was such a trooper, nailed the whole thing in one day, and I didn't write out any sheet music or anything. I forgot if he listened down to the songs and wrote it out himself, or we wrote it out together. There were a couple phrases that I showed him that I wanted to be played note for note, but for the most part, I just let a bass player do what a bass player is supposed to do. But I just remember when this day was over, it must have been like midnight after a long-ass day. Tony left, and I was the only one left in the studio, and if I remember right, I was just started to tear up and start crying, and just I was so fucking pissed at myself for allowing this to happen and letting such a stupid error happen. It wasn't like I was a beginner musician. It's just I've never seen anyone with a reputation who has let me down so much. Never seen it happen. Didn't see it coming. Genres are different. And just because someone is a genius at one thing doesn't mean they can even do a halfway decent job at another thing. This was the first time I experienced that. Of course, many, 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 many times in my career after that, I have experienced it, but I've always known what to do to avoid it because of this experience. And always cherry pick people. So on the next record, on Music for Speeding, I fixed that. I got bass players who killed on the stuff, and I had them play on demos before I even went into the studio, which brings me to another life lesson that I learned on this record, which is make demos. True Obsessions was the first of my solo albums where I was specifically asked by the record company to make demos. And on my first 3 solo records, there was no demos in sight. It was all in my head or on a very, very primitive cassette ghetto blaster recording. Of course, on those things you can't really overdub, so, a lot of my music, especially back then, was based on stacking guitars and counterpoint and things like that. So my demos were really just cassettes for myself to remember parts. They were definitely not give anyone any idea what I was planning if someone were to listen to those cassettes. It'd be like one line, and then right after it, I'd play a harmony or something. So I never really was in the process of making demos. I was just like, I want to go and do the real thing. I know what I'm going to do. It's all in my brain. I'm ready for it. But when you're on a major label, things are different. They want to know where their money's going, and they want to make sure you're on the right track and you're going to make something that's going to sell. And holy shit, now I got to make demos, okay? I don't have a home studio, and I'm not used to letting anybody hear anything until it's done. And so this was a huge adjustment, and it was frightening. Eventually, I would learn that making demos and making hundreds and hundreds of demos is the key to making a strong album. But at this point, I was either too full of myself to think that way, or just didn't want to do it because there was no place to do it. There was no budget to do it. This time on True Obsessions, I had the budget, but I still didn't really know the process of doing demos. In Megadeth, we did demos. We did demos for Countdown, I remember, and I'm sure we did for Euthanasia as well, but I don't remember those as well as the Countdown sessions. So yeah, now I got to do demos, and I'm like, I do not want to lose this record deal. The record label was EMI, and so I was doing a lot of back and forth conceptual talking with the EMI people in Japan, mostly. And, talk gets you only so far. You've got to have something for people to hear so they know what the hell you're talking about. Now, I'm sure that a deciding factor in me getting signed was the fact that Megadeth was really, really doing well at that point, and maybe the peak of its career, you might be able to say. All of the records that we had done at that point had gone gold or platinum or multi-platinum. And so it was a point where a label might say, okay, well, let's give these members a shot. Let's give this guy a shot at solo records. He's done it before. He's released 3 of them already, and they're, well received, but never really got a major label push. So I was excited. To be offered that, and very thankful for my position in Megadeth at the time. I'm sure that was a very good consideration for the label, because labels, it's not really if they like you or not, or if they like your music, or they think you're talented, or any of that stuff. The only thing that matters at all is whether they think they can turn a profit or not. And, they have ways of doing that, and they hear music and they know how to market it, how to sell it, how to package it, all those things. So they need to hear demos, especially for a new major label artist, which this was my solo debut. So, I don't have any demos, and I don't have any way to make demos. And, like I said, we'd previously talked a lot about what we're going to do on the record, and they wanted vocal songs, and I'd never done vocal songs on my solo records before. But I'm like, yeah, I'll make it happen. And you got to give them something to listen to. So to buy some time, I remembered a song called Hands of Time, which was written by Steve Fontano. And this song was done while I was in Cacophony. He wrote the song, and he had me play guitar on it as a session. So maybe I got paid some money to do that. And I just played on his demo for Hands of Time. And I kind of always remembered that song as being a nice song, although it was kind of dated sounded then, so I'm pretty sure it sounds pretty dated now. But I remember it was a nice song, and it was a very strong melody, and the type of thing that I think a Japanese label would listen to and see potential in. So I called up Fontano and I said, dude, what do you think if I try to get Hands of Time on my next solo album? And he was excited about that because he had not sold the song yet. And so I sent the demo that I did with Fontano maybe 6 years prior to the label. And they did like it. And it kind of held them off for a little bit, but they want to hear more demos. And they want... I don't remember much of the direction that we talked about back and forth, but I know that they didn't want me to do stuff so much like the introduction album. The introduction album, even more so than Scenes, has got kind of a, kind of kind of the new agey, healing music kind of thing, massage therapy type of thing. And they didn't want that at all. They wanted a rock album that, had my guitar playing, for the guitar fans, and had good melodic songs for the rock fans, and metal for metal fans. And they just kind of wanted Marty, but they didn't want the Scenes or introduction things. And I don't think they wanted too much Dragon's Kiss either. I think they just wanted to see me go into a more commercial direction. And I took their direction seriously because, if you do things right, you can make a big move. You can move up in your career. You can move up in just everything if you do things right. And this is a huge chance to make a big move. So, I was listening to them and trying to learn from their suggestions and tried to accommodate. And I'm not blaming them in any shape or form for anything that I don't like about the record, because the things I don't like about the record have nothing to do with the record company's suggestions or direction or anything. So anyway, they want more demos, and I'm like, well, I got to come up with some demos somehow. So I wrote some songs, and I wrote 3 songs, 3 vocal songs. And I went to a little tiny cubbyhole studio where a good friend of mine played drums, and the studio is about the size of his drum set. And I went in there with these 3 songs, showed him the songs, and it must have been a little 8-track thing, or I don't remember what kind of system it was, but showed him these little songs. We recorded it, and I had my good friend Tommy Gaddis from Deuce do some vocals. And also my good friend Chris Catero, I believe, did some vocals on this demo as well. They were both in a band called War Dog on Metal Blade back then, and they came in and helped me out. They might have even written lyrics, because I'm just utter shit at lyrics. I remember I did write some of the lyrics. Anyway, we did these little demos. We did 3 songs. One of them was a song called Lead, Follow, or Get Out of the Way, which pretty much sucked. Another song was called Forgotten Me, which was a ballad that eventually made the record, but we changed the title to Last September. And another song was called Independence, which was actually a really good song, and would have fit really good on a Megadeth record. I don't know why it didn't make the record. I forgot. Must have been some reason. It was kind of a metal song with a really, really good intro. Nothing ever happened with that. That was pretty good. So I said the demo, it sucked overall. And I sent it to the record label, and I'm sure they gave me some direction. But they didn't shelve the record, so that's all I really cared about. And the rest of the songs were all just kind of in my head. I didn't demo any of the songs, the instrumental songs, and the label didn't really hear any of them until the record was done. They knew they were going to be there, but and I don't even remember if I must have done some primitive demos of the other vocal songs, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I just got away with demoing these 4 songs I just mentioned to you. But this will bring me to one of the reasons that the record doesn't stand up for me is because when you make demos, you kind of hear the music as a full song, each song as a song. When you don't make demos, you might be in love with certain parts of the song, and you just got to record it because those parts are there, without realizing that the whole rest of the song is not that great, or worse yet, totally sucks. You don't know that, because you're not really enjoying the piece of music as a song. You just know you have this slam dunk cool part, and you want to get that cool part in there. But when you make a demo, you realize that that cool part is still cool, but it's sandwiched right in the middle of a bunch of garbage or stuff that you get bored of really quickly. And for whatever reason, I was just not smart enough to make demos and live with them and polish them up. I just didn't do it. I thought, if I work hard in the studio and if I have any problems, I'll fix them as I go. And for the most part, that's what I did, and stuff came out okay. And at the time, I thought it was much more than okay. At the time, I thought, this is it. I've outdone myself. It's by far my best record. And I honestly feel that way about just about every record I do. And usually that feeling lasts a long, long time. But True Obsessions, it didn't last all that long, and for reasons I'll get into later. So I really wish that I had made demos. Another huge lesson that I learned from the True Obsessions album was, for God's sake, before you record a song, you gotta check the range of the vocalist who's gonna sing the song you've written. And it sounds like a no-brainer, but just never run into these problems before. All my bands prior to this point, if we had a vocal part that was too hard, we would just change the song as we were writing it to match the vocalist naturally. So you never think about whether, he's not going to be able to sing it in the studio, because when you're writing the song, you're hearing it in real time in rehearsal, and you'll either change the vocal melody or change the music to accommodate the vocalist's range, even without consciously thinking about it. But in the world of real songwriting, you're always thinking about the vocalist and where his range is. Is it from this C to this F, 2 octaves, an octave and a half, more or less, whatever it is, people have a finite range. And in the world of songwriting, even especially recently, if I've written songs for other artists, which I've done quite a few of in Japan, you'll get some information from that artist's camp where you'll get, the actual range. This person hits a high F or whatever note it is their top is this note, their bottom is this note, and you'll even get the sweet spot. You'll get a lot of information about the way they sing before you even start thinking about what key the song's in, what notes you're going to use in your melody. You've already got a bunch of information on that. Now here's where I made a very crucial mistake in the True Obsessions record. I had a great singer to the album, a guy named Stanley Rose, and just a fantastic singer, really good range, and a really unique voice that fits with rock and ballads, and he had a great ear for harmonies. I remember on the song Shine On Me, there's so many harmonies, and I remember just having him double and triple and quadruple and do track after track after track after harmonies, and he nailed them so well that I would just keep asking him to do more, because I'm big into harmony vocals, so he could nail it. So I just run him through the mill on it. He did such a great job singing. And so he sang on 3 songs on the record: Last September, Shine On Me, and Live and Learn. And I believe he wrote lyrics as well. So he was a godsend, and I knew he was going to kill it on the record. And the only song that he didn't write or have part in writing is this song called Hands of Time, which I talked to you about before. And by the time Stanley got down to the studio to record, we had already done all the other tracks. I mean, everything was done. All of the guitars, the keyboards, the bass, the synths, the lead guitar solos, the fills, everything was done. The only thing left was vocals. So he did a fantastic job on the 3 songs he did. And then we got to Hands of Time, and it was out of his range. It was like maybe a half step. It wasn't totally out of his range. He could do it, but if you know the song and you hear it, it really needs the type of voice that can sell it. So you've got to have a little headroom in the vocal range to sing that. It can't just be barely making it. It can't be sung kind of light. And it was maybe, I would say a step or a half step, somewhere that much out of his comfortable range. I think he could belt it out at a gig maybe and it would be okay, but in the studio it's not nearly that forgiving. And he did give it a great shot. He gave it a great shot, but it wasn't, the record. It wasn't the album. It wasn't a keeper. And so here I was again, no singer. And that song is really, really hard to sing, apparently. I'd never even thought whether a song is easy or hard to sing before. Another real thinking about it now, it's just ridiculous how I made so many albums before that, but never ran into that kind of problem. So here I was again, clock's ticking, I don't have a singer. All right, so there's no way I was going to find somebody to do the song that day, so we shut down, and I called the singer who did the original demo, like 5 or 6 years ago, a guy named Jesse Bradman, who is a Class A singer. This guy was just killer. And like Stanley, but his range was a little bit different. It was a little bit higher. And I think Stanley might have had a deeper low part of the range, but Jesse really had good, solid strength in the high notes. And we needed that for Hands of Time. So Jesse lived in San Francisco, and we were recording in LA, so we had to fly him down and put him up, and I hadn't seen him in 5-6 years, and I knew him, and I'd worked with him before, so it was kind of comfortable, but, it was kind of weird saying, dude, come down here tomorrow and record a song that you haven't heard in 6 years. But he came down and he just tore it up. He rocked it, and I felt good about it, but even though he rocked it, there was like pitch discrepancies. There were little pitch things. It was a little pitchy here and there. And it was the type of thing where you can't blow out your singer trying to fix little syllables here and there. But there was no question that, it needed tuning, which back then it was being done. It was being done in the mainstream world of recording. Not anything near like today. It was done very much, not hush-hush, but no one ever thought about it. And, of course, that kind of tuning that they use, that on-purpose type of tuning that they use in rap music a lot, that wasn't the type of tuning I was looking for. I just wanted, pitches to be brought right into pitch or close enough that they really, really sell the melody. And at that time, very few engineers had the ability to tune vocals. It wasn't something that came with the territory. And my engineer, Steve Fontano, it either wasn't his forte or he was done because the sessions were over. Fortunately, Max Norman, who owned the studio, had experience in tuning. But unlike the auto-tuning that they have today, where you just kind of draw things in until they work and it happens in minutes or seconds, back then, tuning took a very, very, very long time, and it was expensive. So to hire Max to do that, not only for the studio time, but for him as an engineer, was a very unexpected and pretty costly little endeavor. It took an entire day, and that was normal back then. It was normal to take a long time to tune a song with that many harmonies in it and that many nuances. And it wasn't like, a lot of songs you can get away with tuning a couple little major parts, fix a couple things and leave the rest, and it's cool. But this song, to sell it, it just had to be spot on in tune. It was a real commercial pop ballad. And so instead of just fixing any main problems, and there wasn't really any big problems, there was just a lot of little 2 cents higher, 2 cents lower type of things that once they sunk into the proper pitch, it just sent the thing home and it really kicked ass. The vocal performance was just fantastic and lots of harmonies. Took a long time to sing it, but he did a great job, and then Max tuned it. But I was just totally blown away that even though I knew Stanley was such a great singer, it just didn't even occur to me that if something's out of someone's range, it just doesn't get done. You cannot do it. It's not any fault of theirs. It's just not in their range. So that was a really big eye opener. And it's lucky. There's more things we'll get into, but all the things that I learned from this record have helped me immensely ever since then. I mean, you can see it in the jump of quality from True Obsessions to Music for Speeding. It's just night and day from my perspective. Whether you like the music on one better than the other is a different story, but from my outlook on it, I righted a lot of wrongs on Music for Speeding, and that's why a lot of the songs get played live, and even still now, and I could still listen to that if I wanted to. Now, the next thing, and probably the most important lesson that I learned from the True Obsessions album is definitely, and it's such a cliche, and I hate to even say it, but it's true. Be yourself is all I can say, because when you get your first shot at major label attention or major label release, all sorts of things come flooding through your mind. Things like, this is my chance to really break into the mainstream. Of course, I was already firmly implanted in the mainstream with Megadeth, and we were, on top of the world in the band, and I loved every second of that. It was fantastic. And now you've got the label, a major label behind, the same label behind Megadeth is also behind me now, and they obviously believe in me enough to put me up to where, the guitar heroes of that time, the really big names and the people who are making successful solo records, they saw me in that light as well, and I really wanted to make a big step. And so I kind of thought about what my solo music was like, and then I started to look at what was really popular as far as the world of guitar music. And this was just a fatal mistake. You think, well, now's my chance. A lot more people are going to listen to this record than any of my other records, solo records before. So if I can do something a little bit similar to what the successful solo artists are doing, maybe I can tap into that success myself. It's a very common thing. People start to see, and it really wasn't so much about dollar signs. It was more about just like stepping up career-wise and respect-wise, and just having more clout as an artist, and just being a more mainstream, more widely known artist and widely enjoyed. I mean, the main goal has always been to play for as many people as possible, and that never changes. But now you start to get your eyes clouded up with things like, now this is my chance to really, make a certain kind of impression. So you start calculating things, and it's to some extent, I had sort of learned from the Megadeth example that if you just kind of simplify things a little bit and kind of gear a little bit away from the insanity and just kind of channel that into a little bit more of a commercial area, bam, you get success. If you take the album Rust in Peace, which did very, very well, and it was extremely good record, and then you compare it to the next album, Countdown to Extinction, and even more so, Euthanasia, it's not really a coincidence that since we went a little bit more commercial, more and more fans bought the record, more and more fans went to the shows. We became a bigger band than we were. I mean, they're all really, really solid albums, but Countdown and Euthanasia was a very conscious effort to try to make use of and capitalize on the platform that we had finally reached and reach for a higher plateau, which we very victoriously did. And I was very proud of that work that we did to do that. It's not easy to do. And so I started thinking really seriously about, what my solo direction should be. And, I'm sure it's a common mistake, and I'm not going to kill myself over it now, that's for sure. But looking back over it, it's kind of a rather, not embarrassing, but some of the stuff I really honestly think I was trying to not capitalize on, but not rip off, but what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying to sort of emulate what I thought the more popular guys were doing, which is such a grave mistake for many reasons. First reason is, just say the record took off and just sold bucket loads. And actually the record did sell pretty well. It sold better than my previous records, and it didn't light up the charts or anything. It wasn't huge, but it wasn't a disappointment to anyone, and it did okay, and it sold records considering the genre of music that it was, and it did okay. But just say, for example, that it did really, really, really well, and the music was not necessarily totally from my heart. It was calculated mannerisms of other players and other artists and people who were higher up the ladder than I was, but that's with their music, not my music. So what's the point? I mean, if you're copying someone else, even if you make it, it's not really you there making it, and then you'd have to keep up that facade of playing like someone else that maybe you didn't even like that much in the first place. And that was the biggest mistake. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with copying or mimicking or paying homage to people that you really like and respect. I think that's fantastic. That's completely fine. Even as an artist, it's okay to do that. But to just look at the chart and say, well, I think I want to be where this guy is, so I'm going to try to do what he does. I'll try to do it my way, but I just want to, he's doing something right, so I want to, sort of get some of his mojo or something. That's fine, I guess, if you really like that music, but I just did things for the wrong reasons. I wrote songs like Rock Box, which, at the time I thought, this is it. This is what people expect guitar heroes to play. People expect this kind of music, this kind of playing, these kind of beats, and these kind of solos. That's what is selling, and that's what guitar lovers like. So I kind of mixed up simplifying things with dumbing them down. Whereas I thought that if I dumbed this stuff down, it would be just good enough for the masses. Obviously, it meant that I didn't really have a whole lot of respect for what the masses were thinking was great guitar music at the time or ever. And guitar music as a genre, I think, is suspect because, music is music. And guitars are in all kinds of music. But for some reason at that time, I was like, I think guitar fans want me to play stuff like this. And it just wasn't me. It wasn't in my heart. Although I convinced myself that it was, and I tried to make my interpretation of what I thought would bring me to the next level, but it just sounded like somebody else. And I'm not the best copier of other people. I'm pretty good at doing my own thing, but it was just such the wrong thing to be writing and producing and creating stuff that really doesn't represent what's in my heart musically at all. And so I don't think I've listened to this album almost ever since, maybe 2 years since it was released. I really haven't, because I just feel like I made a big error in just not being myself. And that's what it is. It's really, I'm sure I could probably think of better words to explain the feeling, but I guess the best way to explain it is if you have a piece of music, you don't mind playing it for somebody years or decades later. I think I would mind playing some of these songs for people now. I would definitely not say, hey, go listen to this record because I'm really proud of it and it stands the test of time. I wouldn't say that because there's so much other stuff in my career that I feel completely represents where I was musically at the time, and I even still like it now. And things like my most recent 4 or 5 records, it's really, really come to become an art to be able to express myself that clearly. And I'm just super, super impressed with the fact that all of these lessons I learned in True Obsessions, I actually implemented on my later records to bigger and bigger extents down the way. And so the main one, there's something on the record that sounds like it could have been like a Stone Temple Pilots type of thing, and they were big at that time, and just all kinds of things. And, the song Shine On Me, I don't really even know. I don't even know, man. It's just, it doesn't sound like it was written from my musical place. And it's really weird, this whole album. If you look at the scenes and introduction and Dragon's Kiss before it, and you also listen to music for Speeding after it, all of those albums have like melodic twists and turns, and you might want to call them Martyisms, stuff that only I would be stupid enough to do, or only I would want to do. Just things that really, really outline my feelings musically. But this album, of course there's some spots on it that do that, but for the most part, it doesn't. It sounds like someone else for a lot of it. Now, I will definitely say there's a few parts on True Obsessions that I truly, truly love. Like the entire song Rio, I think is absolutely fantastic, and that's real. That's the real thing. That's I feel like that's real. and some other little things. The ending of The Yearning is really something I love. The melody and the timing on that is just, it's really sweet. But the main riff in The Yearning, what the hell was I thinking? With that B3 organ on it, I can't stand B3 organs. No offense to all of you B3 organ people out there. It's just, it really has no place in my music. And oh my God, I just don't know what I was thinking with that main riff in there. What else do I like? There's a lot of spots on the album, parts on the record that I really, really, really love. Then I probably, if I heard them now, I think, wow, this is great. Actually, one song, Farewell, which is one of my favorites on the record. That song has a section in it that I really, really love. The part where it's all piano. And I took that section and I made a new arrangement of it last year, and we played it live, the complete new arrangement. So the only songs that I've ever played off this record live are Rio and Farewell, and that's like maybe 2 times each max. But Farewell, I have a whole new arrangement that I did. And one thing that I can say that I like about that record, at that time, I was really influenced by this composer named Randy Edelman. He'd done the soundtrack to a movie called Come See the Paradise, which was one of my favorite movies, not only for the super hot actress who's in it, Tamlyn Tomita, who, oh my God, it was just, I was so freaking in love with that girl. But the thing about that record, that movie, was the soundtrack that really got me. I mean, the story was really super good and emotional, but the soundtrack was just bombastic in, not in the noisy bombastic level, but in the emotional level of when you have music that really makes you get emotionally invested in the story. Sometimes the music gets in the way, sometimes it's just right, and sometimes the music is an important character. And for me, I just heard all these melodies that I loved, so I was really influenced by him from that movie. And he also did another movie, I think it was called either 1812 or 1912 or something with a date, which also had some wonderful, wonderful music in it, and a couple other soundtracks. And I tried to emulate his thing. Now, like I said before, when you are copying or paying homage to someone you like, then you're still kind of making your own music because that person's music is a part of you. You know what I'm saying? You know, your influences are a part of you. When you start ripping off guys that you're not even influenced by, you don't really even know much about their music, you just see where they are and you respect them, that's just lame. It's just not something that I would do. I did it and I regret it. But anyway, I was into this Randy Edelman stuff, so like there's parts in Intoxicated where it suddenly gets quiet, and my favorite one is in Farewell. And I used this sound, let's see, I'll play it on guitar here. I used this sound, and it was actually a fake guitar sound. It was something like this. Anyway, that melody, there was this synthetic fake guitar plucked sound in a synthesizer that I just loved. It just did that part just right. So that sounds all over the record. And in Farewell, it just plays the melody so gorgeously. And I really, I wish the rest of the song was as pleasant to me as that part is. But you kind of, you grow as you go along. And there's a couple other parts of that record that I really, really like. But yeah, like I said, you know, being yourself is such a cliche, but I don't feel like I would want to have a lot of those songs as a calling card for me nowadays. Okay, another thing, life lesson that I learned from this record is about the album cover, the dreaded album cover, graphic design, photos, all that stuff. Now, up to this point, I had not had the greatest of luck with album covers. As a matter of fact, I don't even think I had one good album cover in my career up until this point. It's a talent to know what you want visually, artistically, and getting it. You could say you can hire a great artist and say do something cool, and they do or they don't or whatever. But it's a whole nother talent to kind of know what you want and then get it done and have it look fantastic. And I had not had any luck with that. I mean, my album covers were famously horrible in Hawaii. Oh my God. Really, really bad. And Vixen, and it all boils down to how much you care about it and how much talent you have for making things better. I didn't have the talent, and honestly, in those early days, I just wanted it done, so I let the record labels do whatever they wanted. And that's kind of a stupid way to go around representing yourself with one shitty record cover after another. And, they got a little bit... Cacophony was... yeah, even like, people are going to go off on me, but I don't even think that some of the Megadeth album covers were as good as the music inside the albums themselves. I mean, I think the Euthanasia album cover is not only one of the best album covers in Megadeth, but one of the best album covers of anything. I thought that was just an absolute work of art, stroke of genius, fantastic cover inside and out. I was super, super pumped to be, associated with that, be a part of it. And I mean, Richard Avedon shot the photos, so that'll tell you just about how cool that album cover is. I mean, the inside of that. The graphics on the front and back were just godlike. That one I loved. But the rest of them are kind of hit and miss as far as I'm concerned. Still good. And really, the music is what matters. But still, a great album cover is a great thing. And in Megadeth, we hit a big home run with Euthanasia. But back to True Obsessions. Here I was again. Now I'm on a major label with my solo stuff, so I'm starting to get a big head. And, you get a big head in the world of rock music, especially when your band has hits. It is a really amazing phenomenon that happens when you're in anything, not just a band, but anything that's successful at a particular moment. During that time, the way people treat you is just completely different than the way they treat you before and after. It's just a trip, man. When your record's on the charts, people are just different. And I'm not saying like in an ass-kissing kind of way, but they're different. They're more impressed by your presence in front of them, and they're more willing to do anything to make things go well for you. And just everywhere you go, that's the place to be. And the people want to be there, and they want to do what they can to deserve to be there. And this happens anytime that something good is happening. If you have a hit record, or if you have a TV program that's doing well on TV, or if you're in a major well-known commercial, or if people know you from something right now at that time, there's just a different air. Of course, if you have a long career and people respect you, that's always wonderful. But there's something about at the time, in real time, when things are going well, there's just something, and you kind of know that for some reason it's not fake, but it's kind of fleeting, and you know it's there because of the success. And but you know, a lot of people really get off on that, and it's hard not to like it. But at the time of True Obsessions, the label was like, well, we want to get you the best photographer, and we want to get this famous fashion model photographer to do the album. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's great, sure. Not stopping to think that I'm here making a rock record, a rock metal guitar record. A lot of my fans could give a flying fuck about fashion photography and having me look like some kind of model. I'm just a long-haired rock dude. Then and still now. But, you know, I went along with it. The photographer was super good. But his forte was not rock musicians or album covers. It was, you know, shooting for Vogue and things like that. But I just come off doing a photo shoot with Richard Avedon, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest photographers of all time. And also, well, he did shoot like those Beatles covers, but he was not known as a rock photographer. He was in his own league, his own genre. He shot presidents and Marilyn Monroe and stuff like that. So the idea of a fashion photographer doing the cover kind of appealed to me. And well, I went along with it. And you know how it is. It's the typical fashion photographer thing. Oh, I'm loving it. The camera's loving it. Make love to the camera. All those boring cliches. That kind of stuff. And I was eating it up and enjoying it. And it was just the wrong thing. But I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the music. I didn't have a concept of what I wanted the cover to look like. But I thought, well, this guy's a big fashion guy. It's going to look good. And it did look good, but it was wrong. And you know, it's a little bit, I don't know. I just didn't think it was, at the time I liked it. Like I said, you know, at the time I thought the package was my best work yet, but I can't really look back on it and say that I want to drag it out for people to go check it out again now. There's much, you know, I'm still in love with my more recent work. Not in a egotistical way. I just really would be proud for anyone to hear that stuff because it's the real deal. And I don't feel that way about True Obsessions. So the cover, to me, was another sort of fiasco. Still better than my previous stuff, which was absolute. You can't really. It's really, really horrible. It looked like a good cover for somebody else, but not for me. And you know, you gotta be a fashion model if you want a fashion model to take your picture. You know, and I don't have those qualifications. So so the cover was, there's that. So I started to think a little bit more about the covers of records. Find time to do it. You know, 4 or 5 solo records in, and then I start to think about, hey, you know, people are going to look at these things and decide whether they want to buy it or not. Music for Speeding, I love the record. I loved it then. I still love it now. Hate the title. Don't know what I was thinking. I thought it would be great to have music that you drive in a car and you get pulled over for speeding. I think the title's lame. The album cover, it's what I wanted at that time, but it was not great by any. It wasn't even good, but I don't hate it. I finally got a great album cover on loudspeaker, and ever since then, I've been extremely, extremely into the process of getting album covers exactly the way I want them, and they've been pretty solid since then. Inferno being a masterpiece, and Wall of Sound. When that got done, I was just really, really happy with it, and I think it's a classic album cover. I just love it. But got to have a bunch of not failures. Well, maybe failures. You got to fail a bunch of times till you get any kind of success. But I don't want to be all down on this record, because there are a lot of good points about this, and I have a lot of good memories making the record. My dad came out. My folks lived in Maryland at the time, and he came out to LA for business and visited me in the studio when we were doing a vocal day, and that was fun. And we went out to eat, and it was always great to have any of my family come and visit. And let's see, a lot of good things. Richie Kotzen came down, and I think he lent me a guitar for something. And at that time, he was doing this really sick record that I was blown away by. And I've always been blown away by his talent. So we hung out a little bit, and good friend Angus Clark from Trans-Siberian Orchestra came down, and I think he was in the studio when I was tracking Rio. And I remember I was, trying to play really good, because there's another good guitar player in the room. And I'm thinking, why don't I just try to play good all the time? When I'm playing by myself, why does somebody have to be here for me to play good? So, or play well, to use the proper grammar. But yeah, a lot of good memories. Steve Fontana, one of my favorite people in the world, engineered it. We had a lot of fun. Max Norman was great, and he was also a great teacher, and he saw me going through a lot of the trials and tribulations of the record. And he says, well, welcome to the real world, my friend. I remember him giving me major label advice, and he was always a good guy. And so what's good about the record? I tried a lot of new things to varying degrees of success. I think the song Espionage was kind of my attempt to commercialize cacophony style music. And I don't really think it succeeded. It's okay. It's pretty cool. It's got some neat parts in it. It's kind of fun, but nowhere near the kind of properly constructed songwriting that I would be interested in even working with now. Although I do really, really like the ending of it, where I'm kind of doing this ad-libbing solo thing. It's very exotic sounding, and I like that. What else is on there? Last September, I liked the guitar solo, and I liked the vocal work on it. I had originally written lyrics to it. It was called Forgotten Me, and then I had Stanley sing those, and Steve Fontana, the engineer, says, dude, these lyrics fucking suck. I'm going to tell you flat out, you're not going to do this. You can't. These lyrics suck. And I'm like, yeah, they do. I agree. And so Stanley and Fontana wrote some great lyrics on the spot, blew mine away, and now that's what the song turned into. Even still, I don't think it's such a hot song. I don't think the lyrics are really have any kind of meaning that I can really pick up out of it, and it's just not the type of music I like. I don't know. Is it like it's like mellow Bad Company? I don't really know what I was thinking. I was like really into The Cure at the time, but that was so far away from The Cure. Just not really sure what the hell I was trying to do, but decent solo. It was like, when I was a kid, there was a lot of bands that I liked the record only because of the guitar solos. So I'd fast forward through the song, get to about the middle of it and listen to the solo and then go to the next song. And sadly, despite the good performances by all the members, Last September fits into there for me. And Shine on Me is kind of the same thing, and great vocals, just a poorly written, not strong, and I don't know, just don't know where it fits. And Intoxicated was pretty good. Actually, that was the one that the label, oddly enough, it was an instrumental, and the label picked that one up to kind of bring some attention to, and I played it live in Japan a few times. That has its moments, but there's some parts of that I really, really don't care for. The bridge section is just, I don't know what I was thinking. And the heavy rock part, it just doesn't do it for me. I think that the solos are kind of pedestrian, and I might have been trying to dumb things down because apparently I saw the popular, quote unquote, popular guitar players as not doing things nearly as exotic or as interesting or as deep or melodic as I would normally do. So I, quote unquote, dumbed things down, and that was a mistake. So a lot of that stuff, as the solos really just don't do much for me. I think there was a decent one in the song called Live and Learn. Decent solo, but the song itself, there's another thing. That's a song where I hired a very, very famous drummer who had probably the best tone of anyone on the record, which is saying a lot, but he wasn't really playing in time the way I like drums to be, like onto a click. And I don't mind feeling like it's pushing and pulling, but it's got to be somewhat really related to the click and all this. Although this guy was a fantastic drummer, he just didn't play that way, so it was really hard to get his playing to match my music and my way of writing riffs and songs. And so that was another situation where I learned that, just because someone is superstar doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do exactly what I want them to do. And you can get really, really let down if you expect, someone to be the be-all, end-all. I mean, I think if suddenly, this is a weird example, but if suddenly Jeff Beck, who's like one of the most fantastic guitarists of all time, was asked to play one of Meshuggah's more complex rhythms, you might be let down at the results. And Leonard were you might be let down by that. So there's a word in Japanese that I can explain this, a little saying. It's mochiya mochiya. If you want, I guess in English translation, if you want cake, you go to a bakery. You go directly to the specialist. And I was not cool enough to think that way then. Since then, I've definitely cherry picked people for every single part of a song. I mean, on my last few records, I've used 5 different, piano, synth, keyboard players on the same song. If you look at the song Sorrow and Madness, there's 5 different people playing keyboard parts to match their specialty for exactly what I want in that song. And that's just how I've done it for the last several years, because that's the way I get things exactly right and no regrets. But at that time, it wasn't like that. And back to good things about the record, it got a lot of good fan response, and it got a lot of good promotion, and got a lot of good press, a lot of good reviews. To some extent, it really took me to the next level, and it did what I had hoped it to do. Of course, I had hoped it to be the biggest superstar guitar album of all time, which of course it wasn't, but it definitely, like I said before, didn't disappoint anybody at the time, including myself, and the label liked it, the critics liked it, fans liked it. Even if you weren't a fan of Megadeth, a lot of people liked it, and so I have absolutely no problem with that. That's really all that really matters when you put out something, is for the people. And so I was very pleased with that. And people still talk to me about it now. And the main thing, the best thing about it was I learned a lot of very, very, very valuable lessons that I just spoken to you in detail about. And a lot of valuable lessons in this record. And thankfully, I was smart enough to implement what I learned little by little. Some things I implemented right away on the next record. Some things took more time. But all of those things I learned from. And the most important thing I learned from was I really have to have a dog in the race, so to speak. It really has to be me. It really has to be what I want it to be, because then I'm going to enjoy playing it live. I can be myself. And what's the point of not representing yourself the way you want to? I mean, that's the whole point of making music in the first place, is you're singing, you're bringing your music to people, regardless of 2 people like it or 2 billion people like it. It's got to be you. I mean, it's such a cliche, but I really feel that way. My records since then have sold to other various degrees. Some have done really, really well. Some have not done that well. But I'm equally satisfied with all of them. And that's because every single one has been exactly the way I intended them to be and met my expectations. So this podcast has got to cut off now. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you still like the record. And be safe, be healthy, take care of yourself, and take care of everyone around you. And thanks so much for your support. It means the world to me. And I'll see you soon. We got a lot of cool surprises coming from this neck of the woods. So definitely stay tuned and stay safe.